Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA on a Monday morning. Our next guest is a man who's been busy in his life. He's been a columnist for National Review Online. He, before that, was a lawyer, and most of us know him as the lawyer who brought down the Blind Sheikh. It prosecuted him successfully after the 1993 bombings of the World Trade Center at that time. And now, again, an author, but his most recent book coming out right now, Faithless Execution, last week, building the case for Obama's impeachment. And you may be surprised that he doesn't call for impeachment, but he talks about building the case much as he did against the Blind Sheikh. We're talking about Andrew McCarthy, who joins us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Andrew, always a pleasure to have you in. Thank you so much for joining us.
Gary, it's my pleasure to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Congratulations on the new book out. And, when people read your stuff, when they read your columns, and I'm one of those who faithfully reads them, I'm always amazed by how you lay out the cases for the points that you're making. You can see the lawyer's mind at work, but it's at work in a very logical way, and I really applaud you for that. Well,
thanks so much. I appreciate it. I think if I have any virtue in that regard, it's that I was raised as a prosecutor rather than a journalist. So I've tried in my writing to do what I used to have to do as a government lawyer, which is often take things that are complicated and extensive in time and space and try to reduce them down to something that regular folks can understand, like us.
We were talking with John LeBoutillier a few moments ago about the idea of the president doing the things that he's doing right now, and for people, and again, we want to make it clear as we hear all the time anymore, but for people reading this book, this is not a call to impeach. What is it a call to?
It's really a call to summon the public's attention to the wages of presidential lawlessness, which is one of the things that the framers in putting together our Constitution were most concerned about. They understood that the presidency they were creating was going to have to be a powerful office. They in fact created a presidency precisely because the kind of government by coalition arrangement of the Articles of Confederation was not adequate to the protection of the United States. They needed a powerful office that would be able to both enforce the laws in the United States,
right,
but also protect us against foreign threats to national security. But they also understood if you create a powerful office like that, it would have the greatest potential to do damage to the republic. So they were very concerned about the possibility of presidential lawlessness, and they gave great thought to how to deal with it.
Two of the things you point out in your book, two core principles, you said, separation of powers, and that also includes checks and balances by their very nature, and accountability for the people using those powers. Talk about those two principles, because they are two core principles of a free republic.
Yeah, well, let me start with the second one first, because it's a little bit easier, although it's much misunderstood. When the framers, if you look at the way the Constitution is laid out, all of the executive power, not just some of it, all of it, is vested in one government official, the President of the United States. It's not, contrary to what you would think by the way things get covered, sort of delegated out to a vast expanse of executive agencies. It's all the President's power. And that was because the framers wanted to make sure that the President would be accountable for everything that went on in the executive branch. So despite the fact that President Obama has managed, with the media's help, to cultivate this image that he kind of exists above and outside his own administration, and sometimes even is in the position of campaigning against his own disastrous policies, when Eric Holder or Eric Shinseki or Susan Rice or Hillary Clinton or whatever, whoever else in this cast of characters does something that's outrageous, that is every bit the same as if the president himself did it. And in fact, that's clear by the fact that President Obama promotes and enables these people who subvert the other parts of government from conducting their operations efficiently. Nobody gets fired, nobody gets disciplined, everybody kind of gets protected and moved along. So the framers wanted to make sure that the president was responsible in the public's mind for that, and in fact. And the other thing about checks and balances was the framers understood that the road to tyranny was the concentration of too much power in the hands of one actor or one branch of government. So our government is based on a separation of powers, which the designers of the Constitution thought was our protection from tyranny, and in fact was key to preserving our liberties. And what President Obama's governance has obviously done is attempted, with a great deal of success, by the way, to usurp the powers of the other branches, so that, for example, he presumes the power to decree law and to selectively enforce law, ignore it at will, and the like, when in our system, the president's main job domestically is to see that the laws be faithfully executed.
What's interesting is the president's going to come out today, for example, on student loans, and is going to make another executive order in front of the American people, and at the same time saying, by the way, we want you to support legislation that is coming from the Democrats. I mean, it's interesting that you're trying to have it all ways here when you deal with your powers. And, you mentioned Article 2, for those who haven't read the Constitution for a while, Article 2, Section 1, the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States of America, period. That's it.
Right.
And so, I mean, it doesn't. So one would say, ergo, the accountability also rests on the decisions that he makes with the President of the United States. Would that be a logical jump?
That's what the logical jump is, and that's certainly the way the framers had it. And, if you look, Gary, at the debates over the impeachment clause and the debates over presidential power, what you find is that the framers thought of other kinds of arrangements for executive power. There was this idea of having a two-headed thing. There was an idea of having a commission instead of just a president. And they ultimately came down on the idea of one single president, precisely because they wanted it clear that when the subordinate officials in the executive branch committed acts of malfeasance or maladministration, that was the responsibility of the president, and he is accountable for them as if he committed them himself.
I read a piece that you wrote about your book, and you talk about the IRS harassing the president's political opposition in violation of First Amendment rights, the Justice Department orchestrating the transfer of thousands of guns to violent Mexican gangs. Talk a little bit about that paragraph, because I thought it was absolutely, when you gather all the stuff up here and you put it all together, and the question marks that we have been left with by this administration that said that they were going to be open and transparent, and people thought it was going to be a great administration, and it's been anything but.
Yeah, well, most of us didn't really think it was going to be a great administration. Most of us thought that was just a bunch of blather, and I think, if you looked at Obama's record before 2008, his radicalism and his orientation were pretty evident. Now, a lot of people wanted to believe the hope and change thing, and the vacuous thing about hope and change was that it enabled everybody kind of wistfully to make Obama the sort of projection screen of all their hopes and dreams. But that was, I think, a far cry from where Obama was coming from ideologically. The paragraph that you're talking about, where I lay out the different things the administration has done, is meant to match up or summarize the second half of Faithless Execution, my book, which is an attempt to plead articles of impeachment in the manner in which a prosecutor would plead an indictment. So the last half of the book lays out 7 articles of impeachment as I would write them if I were a member of the House proposing articles of impeachment based on the record that the Obama administration had amassed by the time I released my book. I'd point out that at the time I released my book, we hadn't had things like the EPA regulations and the Taliban 5 swap that we've just had. The problem with writing a book about lawlessness in the Obama administration is that the writer eventually has to stop writing, so the publisher has time to sort of, produce the book and get it out. And in the weeks that happened, the Obama administration rolls merrily along. So I was bound to be 2 or 3 impeachable offenses behind by the time the book came out.
Well, I think your book came out last week, very timely. And I heard at least 3 people during the week citing your book and saying, wait a second here, are we jumping to conclusions? And yet, that's reading into it the fact you didn't even have those last 2 scandals in there. And it's really kind of interesting to me when we look at what impeachment is. And again, I look at the Constitution a lot. The president, the vice president, all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and high crimes and misdemeanors. And I used to be a history teacher. We taught this kind of stuff. And yet you make a point in here. you talk about where high crimes and misdemeanors really come in, but you don't suggest that we impeach the president. You just simply say, if you're laying it out, here's where high crimes and misdemeanors are. Talk a little bit about those being kind of the political wrongs out there that high officials and great public trust repose. And you mentioned that.
Yeah,
you're
exactly right, Gary. The thing with with impeachment is that it's a two-part process, and the more important part is the political. The less important part is the legal. The legal is that you have to be able to prove at least one high crime and misdemeanor, and you mentioned treason and bribery, and those are straightforward what that means. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about what high crimes and misdemeanors are. People hear the term crimes and misdemeanors, and they think that means penal offenses like murder and burglary and the stuff I used to do when I was a prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
But high crimes and misdemeanors is actually a term of art that's borrowed from British law, which the framers were steeped in. As Hamilton put it, it's the political wrongs of public men. What that means is it's the public misconduct of high public officials in whom, and the president is singular in this regard, in whom great public trust is reposed. And much more than penal offenses, the concept embraces offenses of the military code of justice, like conduct unbecoming, dereliction of duty, the violation of an oath, and the like. And what the framers were most concerned about, of course, was conduct that would undermine the governing system that they designed in the Constitution, and very much that includes the separation of powers. So once you understand that that's what high crimes and misdemeanors means, it's pretty easy to see that the Obama administration is guilty, and President Obama is guilty of numerous high crimes and misdemeanors. I mean, I lay out 7 of them in the book. I could easily have turned that into many more than 7. It's 7 with a bunch of subparts, and I try to do it thematically so that it hangs together for the reader a little more easily. But as I point out in the book, the more important part of impeachment than the legal aspect is the political aspect. In their genius, the framers wanted us to have a clear impeachment standard, and we have that in high crimes.
We really do.
Once we grasp what it means. But they also wanted to make it difficult to remove a president because it's so disruptive, and they didn't want it to be an exercise in partisan hackery. So you have this 2/3 requirement in the Senate, that the Senate has to vote to remove the president by a 2/3 margin. And that ensures that no matter how many high crimes and misdemeanors you can prove, the president can't be removed unless there's a strong public will in the American people that it's time for the president to be removed.
You make a point that Faithless Execution, your book, is an effort to raise public consciousness about the dangers of executive lawlessness. And you also say it would be better, from your standpoint, for the president to honor his oath in the last few years here, execute the laws faithfully, and finish the term that way. We've got about half a minute left here, Andy. Wrap it up, and then also tell us where we can get the book and so forth, because I'm going to be running out to feast on this thing.
I appreciate it, Gary. Yeah, it would be best if the president would do what we want presidents to do, which is follow the law. We don't want to be removing presidents because they disagree with us ideologically. But everybody's supposed to follow the law, and that's not a conservative or liberal issue. That's an American issue.
Right.
The rule of law is what we want to have our society based on. And if people are interested in reading more about that, we have a website for the book, faithlessexecution.com, or they can go to my website, andrewcmccarthy.com, for more information, and get the book at Amazon and book places like that.
And Andrew, I'll be picking it up today. Great book, the stuff that I read from it. And, anybody that's ever read your things, I'm telling you, great stuff. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us this morning. I know you're busy, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it.
Talk to you soon. Take care. Andrew McCarthy with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Get the book, Faithless Execution. Building the case for Obama's impeachment. Doesn't call for him to be impeached, but Andrew McCarthy, who built the case against the blind sheik, also building the case here in print. Get out there and read it.